Hi everyone, Raquel here from scrapcosy. Today I'm bringing you a project created for the topic Torn, Ripped and Burned that PaperArtsy is holding on his Fortnite challenge. I was striving to use these stamps by Hotpix. They are the most awesome stamps I've seen on the haberdashery subject. Every single image of them is absolutely beautiful. Today I'll make this art journal with them. Let's get started. I'm just opening my art journal for the next empty page, which is this one, and I'm going to prime it with gesso. I wanted a thin layer, so I started by watering it down and tried to cover it. But then I went ahead and actually put gesso without dissolving anything. Once all it's covered, I used a baby wipe to kind of clear some zones so I can see the text through. My next step is stamping, and I'm selecting some smoothie cardstock paper to stamp my images. I'm using VersaFine ink to stamp them because I'm going to watercolor with them, so I need an ink that doesn't react with water. This one is oil-based, so it's perfect. I'm going to stamp some images more than once, and this is because I'm going to cut them and making things with them. You'll see what I mean later. For example, I'll use the pull threads to actually put some thread through them. And I'm going to use the corset to actually put a little skirt on it. And those empty images there, I'm going to sew some buttons. Well, you'll see everything during the video. And I love this stamp of the swing machine, it's so detailed. This stamp set even has a lace stamp, which is beautiful, and I'm going to stamp it twice. And now it's time for coloring, and for that I'm using infusions and water. I'm using Golden Sands and Rustic Car, and those will be my two only colors that I will be using. I'm not being any careful, actually I'm being very fast and I'm going beyond the borders of the images because afterwards I'm going to cut them, so I don't mind if I go beyond the lines. And you will see that this technique is super fast to color images. Once everything is colored, I'm going to dry it very well and then I'll start cutting. I'll be speeding up the video, so then it's not that boring, okay? For the thread pulls, on the first image I'm cutting two of the pieces. I'm ignoring the one in the center, I'm just making sure that I cut as best as I can the shape of two thread pulls. So the one on the left and the one on the right. And then for the one in the middle I will use another stamped image. And you will see that I have one left. That one will be my base on which I will stick the three images later. It will all make sense, I promise. Okay, now I'm playing around with all the images and see where I more or less will put them through, because I'm going to make some holes in my pages, because this topic is about torn, ripped and burned. So basically I need to destroy something, okay? But don't panic, it will look nice. So just with a pencil I'm lightly drawing a little bit where those holes will be, and now I'm just ripping off the first piece of page, and then I'll rip off a little bit more to make a big hole there. And because things come better in threes, I'm going to make two more holes. These ones are tiny in comparison to the first one, but it will make that all the project kind of holds together. And then on the borders I'm making sure that I curve them up, because I will kind of age them a little bit and then they will seem a little bit burned. Then through the holes I could put some images, but then at some point I decided to actually put that little fabric, which is kind of like a cheesecloth, and I will put it on top of a dark surface. That dark surface is the page underneath, which I've covered with some fresco paint. Chocolate pudding. Now for the edges of the ripped pages, I'm just adding some ground espresso distress ink, regular distress. So there is my burned. And now I will start with my base a little bit. So I'm going to apply just some distress ink on top of both pages, and then I'll flick some water through and heat set it with the heat gun to make sure it reacts like the normal distress does. And once I'm happy with that first layer, I'm going to apply a little bit more of ribbed aged on top and bottom of the edges, and I'll use the same technique, putting some fresco paint through. Now I'll prepare that fabric, that cheesecloth basically, that will be seen through the holes. So I'm basically using some golden sands infusions and some water to dye my fabric. Just spritzing some water on top of my surface, which I pour some infusions on, and then I'm just using my brush to paint that fabric. And then at some point I basically use the fabric on top of my surface to make sure that it's completely wet and full of infusions. And then with the heat tool, I'm just heat setting it so that I don't have to wait for my next step. Now with some Mod Podge, I'm going to adhere that fabric. So I just cut little pieces that I've put on top of the dark surfaces, and I'm just adhering them. So I put Mod Podge on the bottom and also on top of it, and I kind of move the fabric the way that I like, so then you have a bit more texture and it's completely flat, but I can see the threads a bit moving. And I'll do that on all the holes from my 2 pages. I'm cutting off any braid excess there, and I'm just making sure that I have some frayed fabric on the edges as well, because I liked it, and just sticking it again. Some Mod Podge on the bottom and some Mod Podge on the top, and moving around the fabric to give a little bit of texture. And that's done. Now I'll set it aside to make sure it dries, and I'll move on to the next step. I'm edging all the images that I cut to make sure that I don't see white borders. And once everything is done, then I'll assemble all my embellishments. I'm starting with the thread pulls. So first I'm cutting 3 different pieces of thread. 2 of them are actually thread. The other one would be some baker twines that I will fray, you will see. So that is the thinner one, and I'm making sure that I grab a lot of threads together, because I don't want to do one and take ages. So I'm just making sure that I fold them twice, 3 times, 4 times to make sure that I have a bunch of them, and I put them through. And then once it's there, I will fix that on the back with some sellotape. And that will be temporarily until I apply some Mod Podge on top of it. I'm moving to the next one. That one is also thread, a bit more thicker than the previous one. And I'm doing the same, several threads at the same time. That one is so thick that it seems that it's alive. So for that one, I will just keep the sellotape on the back forever so it doesn't move. And then for the last one, I'm using some baker twine. So because it's very thick, I'm just fraying it and just getting like a little piece. And then that one, I'm folding it several times again to have more than one thread. And then I'm putting it through as I did before. I really like this technique because you're incorporating real elements into your projects, and they make it more real than actually having just little pieces of paper. And now I want to attach them to my base. So I'm applying some Mod Podge on top of the thread to make sure that it stays there forever. I'm removing the sellotape only on the first 2. And on the last one, I will just keep it because, as I said, It's very tricky. Now I'm applying some foam tape on the back of the paper that didn't have thread. This is to ensure that I allow some volume and, well, it sticks better, trust me. So I'm putting the first two, and for the last one, which will be on top of the two, I'm adding double the foam tape. Although you don't see it here, I can tell you that it's double, because it will be in the front. And that's it. This is my first little element. Now I'm moving on to the mannequin. I'm going to create a little skirt, and for that I'm using some lace. I'm cutting it because it's too big, and I'm making it smaller, and I'm going to kind of put it on the back to create that little skirt. So I'm going to use some sellotape to fix it on the back. It took me a long while. I'm cutting it here, but well, basically you get the idea of what you get at the end, a little skirt. Again, by adding real elements, I have the feeling that you actually get more texture and more realistic feeling to your actual project. So whenever I can, I will always integrate some real stuff within it. So I'm just putting the skirt and fixing it to the back to make sure that it seems like it's coming, well, through the back. And that's my mannequin. I love it. Now I'm going to turn or distress those three little elements, and what I'm doing is cutting very little cuts there. And then with a wet brush, I'm applying just some water on those cuts that I did, and that makes the paper become so flexible that you can actually turn it and twist it. I hope you can have a look and see it. I'm just making it a bit more aged. And with that little trick, just by adding water on those cuts and on those corners of the paper, it really seems much aged. And you won't believe how flexible it becomes once it's wet. I love this technique. My friend Ida taught it to me. Now I'm going to prepare the laces. So I'm combining the stamped lace with a real lace. And I'm going to do like a stack of 3 of them. You'll see. One that is being shown from the bottom, which is exactly the same one that I used for the mannequin. So repeating the same thing or the same element twice, it makes that your project kind of hangs together. So whenever I can, I do that. And then I'm selecting another piece of lace and I'm stacking it on top of it. So I'm basically putting 3. And I'm preparing 2 of them because they will be the base that I will use in my art journal. So everything is grounded. Now I'm going to sew some buttons on those beautiful stamped images, which are empty. Well, they are empty, so you can actually sew stuff on them or use them, I don't know, like a frame. I really love this technique of, again, adding real stuff onto my project. In this case, they will be real mother of pearl buttons. As you've seen, I've sewn the first button and then I didn't do any knot. I just put some sellotape. That's to avoid that my paper stands out because the knot has more volume than actually sticking the thread with some sellotape. That will make it more flat, and I prefer in this case being flat. And at the end the same, no knot, just some sellotape. And I'll repeat the same on the other frame. I think you could do actually a real sewing kit with these little stamps. You could actually have yours buttons sewn, and then you could actually take it with you if you wanted to go on a travel and have some buttons with you. Love those elements. So now I'm going to stick everything together. So I'm just making sure that I glue my 2 pages. I'm using again Mod Podge, and I'm making sure that I glue them fine. And then I'll do the same with the other side. And I want to keep those borders curled up so they seem that they are burned, or that's what I'm trying. And now I'm adhering that torn piece of paper back to its place, to the corner. And now I will work more on the base, on that background. So I will use some distress oxide that I'm applying on my acrylic block. Then I'm spritzing some water and then applying that to my page. And I will be repeating this all the way on the page. I'm using vintage photo. And then once it's dry, I'm applying some water and continuously using the heat tool to add that texture that distress oxide give you. So the oxidized. And now I'm applying a bit more of that ink, a bit more of water until I like it. And once it's there, I'm switching to a different ink. I think this one is walnut stain. Again, distress. And then with a sponge dauber, I'm applying it on top of the surface because I want more color, I want more ink. And once I have ink all over the place, then I'm going to add some water. So I'm putting some water on my hand and then flickering through some drops. And you can see there that the magic happens. And I'm spritzing some more water and using my heat tool to make it react. And you can see that the background has changed dramatically now. Now I'm selecting some regular distress inks and I'm applying them through the borders, some walnut stain, so I get more intense color as well. And now I'm going to apply all my elements and I will glue them again with some Mod Podge. Now I need to be very careful because my background will react with water, so will react with Mod Podge. So I just need to apply it on the back of the paper and not on top of my surface. Now I'm attaching those scissors with a chain and a safety pin to that piece of paper. That will be an element that will be a bit interactive. Then I'll glue the rest of the things on the surface. And of course the sewing machine has given me a chance of adding a little bit more of thread. So I'm using the same technique that I used before. Putting lots of threads together and then putting them through the sewing machine, like if I was about to sew. So basically the thread goes there on the top and then it would go down to the bottom and until it reaches the needle. This is done. And now I can continue attaching everything down with the glue. Remember, our surface is reactive with water, so I only apply Mod Podge on the back of my papers and making sure that I don't move them. I'm speeding up the process. Basically, that's it. I'm cutting the excess of those laces and we're done. Now I'm going to add a little bit of shadow just to make sure that my pieces stand out. And I'm using some distress ink, walnut stain, just with a brush. First I was applying it through that acrylic block, but then I went directly into the ink pad. So it's basically very dry. And then I'm just going through the borders of each element where I think that I should be adding some shadow. And you don't notice it very well, but actually it really makes a difference. It seems that the images pop out. So I just apply some of my ink on the surface and then I apply it with a brush. And that is my last step. So basically once I finish with all the images doing that, the art journal is done. So here are some close-up photos. I hope you like them. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel to see more things like this one. And make sure that you actually go to the PaperArtsy blog to participate in this challenge. You have a very good chance to win a £50 voucher to spend on their shop. So maybe you can buy these stamp sets if you like. So that was all for today. I hope you liked it. And if you did, please come back to the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye!